Colonel Anya Callows stood in the quiet command center, the hum of machines her only company. The galaxy was ablaze, and the only sound that mattered now was the ticking of the clock that counted down the final days of humanity's fight for survival. She could still feel the weight of the decisions she had made, the promises she had once believed in, the hope that had been shattered. It had all started with the Elysian, the alien species who had arrived without warning, their sleek ships gliding silently through the void. They offered knowledge, technology, and, above all, hope. Anya had been one of the first to work with them, one of the first to believe in their message of peace and cooperation. Their technology could have rebuilt entire worlds. Their wisdom could have shaped a new era for humanity. But the Elysian were not as they seemed. Anya remembered the day the betrayal came, as clear as though it had been yesterday. The Elysian had insisted that they help the United Earth Federation defend against the Zorvax, a ruthless alien empire hell-bent on humanity's extinction. At first, it had seemed like a dream come true. With their advanced technology, the Elysian helped turn the tide of the war. For years, humanity fought side by side with their alien allies. It was the hope of a brighter future. Then the day came when Anya learned the truth. It had been a simple communication, a distress call intercepted from a resistance group on a distant colony world. The transmission was garbled, but the message was clear. They're not what they say they are. The Elysian are in league with the Zorvax. At first, Anya dismissed the idea. It couldn't be true. The Elysian had always been open with her, had always been kind. But the more she dug into the evidence, the more it became undeniable. The Elysian had never been humanity's allies. They had been manipulating the war, playing both sides, feeding the Zorvax intelligence while pretending to help the humans. The Elysian were no saviors. They were enemies in disguise. The betrayal stung deeper than any wound. They had betrayed her trust, manipulated her belief in something greater than herself. The worst part? They had known all along that humanity was doomed, that their meddling was only delaying the inevitable. The Elysian had a grander plan, one that did not involve humans at all. They had always intended to allow the Zorvax to wipe humanity out, leaving the Elysian to take over the shattered remnants of Earth. It was in the wake of that revelation that Anya made her decision. She couldn't let it happen. She couldn't stand by and let her people be wiped out by the very species she had once trusted. She betrayed the Elysian, turning her back on the false alliance and severing all ties with them. It was a dangerous move. The Elysian were not ones to be crossed. They made it clear that if Anya continued to resist, she would be hunted, her people slaughtered without mercy. But it wasn't just the Elysian she had to worry about now. The Zorvax, aware of the fracture in the alliance, were growing bolder by the day. The war was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle to reclaim humanity's future from two enemies who had never seen them as equals. Now, Anya stood at the head of the last war. Humanity's last hope rested on her shoulders. No more alliances. No more trust in the so-called peacekeepers who had already abandoned them. She was the leader of the ragtag resistance, a collection of soldiers, engineers, and civilians who had somehow survived the brutal war that had torn across Earth and its colonies. She had no illusions of winning, no false hopes that they could defeat the combined might of the Zorvax and the Elysian. But there was one thing she did know. Humanity would not go down without a fight. A hologram flickered on the table in front of her, the face of General Markov, her second in command. "Colonel," he began, his voice gruff, "we've got the Zorvax fleet moving toward our last stronghold on Mars. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. What's our play?" Anya's fingers danced over the holographic controls, calling up tactical data. The odds were impossible. Mars was their last bastion, the final holdout against the Zorvax. If they lost it, there would be nowhere left to retreat to. Earth had already fallen. The colonies had already been lost. The Zorvax were closing in, and the Elysian were nowhere to be found. Anya stood tall, her resolve hardening. "We fight," she said, her voice unwavering. "We fight until the last breath. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about our right to exist." We will make them pay for what they've done. The general nodded grimly, knowing that the coming battle would be their last. But there was no turning back now. Anya had made her choice. Humanity would go down fighting, or it would never go down at all. The countdown to the final war had begun. The skies over Mars burned a deep crimson as the Zorvax fleet approached, their massive warships blotting out the stars. The dust storms on the surface of the red planet seemed to grow more intense, as if the very world could sense the impending doom. Colonel Anya Kalos stood at the command center of the Resistance's main base, the faint glow of the battlefield map casting shadows on her face. Her soldiers, men and women from all walks of life, were preparing for what could very well be their final stand. The gravity of the situation was not lost on any of them. Mars had been the last stronghold, the final place humanity had held out hope. The vast cities of the planet were now nothing more than ruins, ravaged by decades of war. But in the underground bunkers and hidden bases, the Resistance had held firm. And now, as the Zorvax prepared to crush them, it was clear this would be their last chance. Colonel, General Markov's voice crackled through the comms, pulling her out of her thoughts. The fleet is almost within range. We're set for launch, but we'll need your orders on the ground. What's the plan? Anya took a breath, her gaze steady on the holographic map. We hold the line here at the last barricades. If we can draw them in, the traps we've set around the northern quadrant will slow them down. Give us just enough time to launch the final strike. We don't have enough firepower for a direct confrontation, Markov warned. We need something big, something to force the Zorvax to retreat. Her mind raced, recalling the resources she had left. Barely anything but scraps and salvage technology. Yet there was something the Resistance had that the Zorvax and the Elysian never expected. Humanity's tenacity. She glanced over at the last of their weapons cache, a hidden prototype they had found buried deep within Mars' red deserts. A weapon of desperation, but also the last chance to turn the tide. There's no turning back now, she muttered under her breath. Prepare the Kestrel. The Kestrel was a weapon of her own design, a massive railgun mounted in the bow of a salvaged cruiser. It was designed to fire a shot powerful enough to pierce the Zorvax fleet shields, but it required precision targeting and a near-impossible trajectory through the hellish environment of Mars. There was no margin for error. As the final preparations were made, Anya stood by the observation window of the command center, watching the Resistance forces gear up for battle. They were soldiers of all ages and backgrounds, some experienced veterans, others fresh recruits, but they all had one thing in common. They fought for survival. They fought because humanity had no other option. Across the room, a young soldier approached her. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the fear that only came in the face of certain death. Colonel, he began hesitantly, do you think we can actually win? I mean really win? Anya didn't look at him right away. Instead, she took a long breath, her gaze fixed on the warships overhead. They were so close now, their menacing forms just beyond the horizon. She could feel the pressure building in her chest, the weight of responsibility pressing on her, the weight of every life in the room, the weight of humanity's last hope. She finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. We win or we die trying. That's the only option left. The soldier didn't respond, but there was a spark in his eyes, a glimmer of understanding. He saluted her sharply before rushing off to join the others. Anya turned back to the map. The Kestrel was ready, but it wasn't enough. She needed something more, something that could throw the Zorvax into disarray, disrupt their momentum. And then, the plan hit her, one final gamble. Markov, she called over the comms. I need you to assemble a strike team. We're going to target the Zorvax flagship directly. I'm going to make a distraction that'll give us a chance to hit them hard. We'll take down their command, and everything else will follow. Understood, came the reply, and she could hear the grim determination in Markov's voice. Everyone ready for a fight? Anya asked her team, standing tall despite the weight on her shoulders. Around her, the soldiers nodded, the intensity of the moment settling into their bones. They knew the stakes. There was no turning back now. Minutes later, the battle began. The Kestrel fired its first shot, sending a streak of light through the Martian atmosphere, striking the Zorvax fleet's outer perimeter. It was a near miss, but it was enough to cause chaos. The Zorvax ships retaliated with volleys of laser fire, lighting up the Martian skies. The surface shook with the violence of the exchange, but Anya knew this was just the beginning. In the midst of the chaos, a small strike team, led by Anya herself, descended from the base in sleek, stealth ships. They had a singular mission: to infiltrate the Zorvax flagship, plant explosives, and disable their command systems. It was a suicidal mission, but it was humanity's last chance to turn the battle in their favor. As their ships descended into the heart of the Zorvax fleet, Anya's thoughts turned back to the Elysian. Her trust had been shattered, but she knew one thing: if they hadn't betrayed her, humanity would never have stood a chance. It was their cruelty, their arrogance, that had awakened the fight in her, and she wasn't going to let that be in vain. The resistance was all she had left, and she would give everything to see it survive. The Zorvax flagship loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette cutting through the fiery expanse of Mars' atmosphere like a titan ready to crush the last of humanity. Anya's pulse raced, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as the stealth ships carrying her team approached the enemy's heart. 5 minutes to target, the comms crackled. General Markov's voice came through, steady despite the chaos of the battle raging above and below them. Remember, the explosive charges are set for the command core. Once you breach, there's no going back. Anya's eyes flickered over her squad. Lieutenant Soren, the veteran sharpshooter; Dr. Lyra, the scientist who had once worked alongside the Elysian and knew their technology better than anyone; Sergeant Venn, the explosives expert with a penchant for destruction; and herself, the leader who had once trusted an alien race, only to now fight for humanity's survival against them. They all shared one thing in common: they had nothing left to lose. The stealth ships were equipped with cutting-edge cloaking technology, remnants of the Elysian technology that had once seemed a gift, but now felt like a reminder of betrayal. The cloaks allowed them to glide past the outer perimeter of the flagship's defenses undetected, but they wouldn't hold forever. The Zorvax ships had scanning technologies that could eventually pierce through the invisibility, and the closer they got, the more vulnerable they became. "Brace yourselves," Anya said, her voice low but resolute. As they entered the flagship's docking bay, a soft shudder ran through the ship. The team's boots hit the cold metallic floor, and they immediately fell into position, spreading out as the ship's automatic systems activated. For the first time in years, Anya felt the bitter taste of fear in her mouth, but she swallowed it down. There was no room for hesitation. "Not now." "Commence the breach," Anya ordered, her voice firm. Sergeant Venn moved first, planting explosive charges at key structural points near the central control room. With practiced ease, he attached detonators and activated the countdown. Each click of the detonator sounded like the countdown to humanity's fate. "We have 5 minutes before the charges are live," Venn said, his tone dry but sharp. "Let's not keep the Zorvax waiting." Anya motioned for the rest of the team to move. The corridors of the Zorvax flagship were sterile and cold, lit by harsh, flickering lights. Everything felt wrong. The very air seemed to pulse with an unnatural, oppressive weight, a stark contrast to the warmth of humanity's remaining strongholds. The Zorvax had taken everything from humanity, and now, with the flagship's heart just ahead, Anya could feel the weight of their dominance pressing down on her. They reached the command core in record time, the doors sliding open to reveal a vast chamber dominated by an imposing control console. This was where the Zorvax called the shots, where every order that led to humanity's destruction had originated. Anya's mind raced. She had no illusions about the fact that the Zorvax were watching. The resistance team was already on borrowed time. "Get to the terminal," Anya commanded Dr. Lyra. "Override the command protocols. We need to shut down their fleet coordination before the charges go off." Lyra nodded, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. She had been invaluable in deciphering Elysian and Zorvax technology, And now, in the heart of the enemy's domain, her expertise was humanity's last hope. As Lyra worked, Soren and Ven took positions, weapons ready. The tension in the room was unbearable, each minute stretching into eternity. Then came the sound of the blast doors locking. An automated security system had engaged. They were trapped. "Move," Anya shouted, adrenaline cutting through her. The team spun into action, but before they could react, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. Zorvac soldiers, massive armored creatures with obsidian-black exoskeletons, emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. "We're not alone," Soren muttered, his voice low but controlled as he lined up a shot. A burst of plasma fire lit up the dark room, narrowly missing Anya as she ducked behind a console. "Ven, can you blow this door open?" she snapped. Ven didn't hesitate, dropping to his knees and setting a charge on the door. The Zorvac soldiers advanced, their weapons charging up, and Anya could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. This was it. This was the moment everything would either fall into place or break apart. With a deafening roar, the door exploded in a shower of metal and sparks. The blast sent the Zorvac soldiers scrambling, and the team wasted no time. "Lyra, how much longer?" Anya shouted over the gunfire. "Almost there." Lyra's voice was strained. "Just a few more seconds. I need access to their master network." A Zorvac soldier lunged at her, but Soren's sniper rifle took him down with a precise shot. The team moved quickly, covering Lyra as she completed her task. The final key was being entered. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered. A loud siren began to blare, and the room shook with the deafening sound of a Zorvac's voice booming over the loudspeakers. "You dare disrupt our plans?" The voice was cold, cruel, familiar. Anya's heart skipped a beat. It was the voice of their leader, Zalkar, the Zorvac's high commander, the very being that had masterminded the destruction of humanity. The voice that had been part of the Alliance's treachery. "Get ready." Anya gritted her teeth. "We finish this now." At that moment, Lyra's hands slammed down on the final key, and the master control systems began to unravel. The Zorvac's flagship trembled beneath their feet as the command core systems began to falter. Lyra's hands danced across the alien console, frantically overriding security protocols, inserting codes that had been pieced together from broken transmissions and decrypted Zorvac schematics. The air hummed with an eerie energy as she initiated the final sequence, humanity's last shot at survival. "We're running out of time," Anya shouted, her eyes darting between the approaching Zorvac soldiers and Lyra's frantic typing. The Zorvac soldiers closed in on their position, their eyes glowing menacingly through their armored visors. Anya's heart beat like a war drum, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Soren, her sharpshooting lieutenant, fired once more, his sniper rifle taking down another Zorvac soldier. But there were too many. The odds were slipping away. "Lyra, now," Anya barked. "I'm almost there." Lyra's voice wavered as she fumbled with the final code. She typed in one last sequence of commands, and the room exploded into chaos. A violent tremor raked through the flagship as the central command network shut down, cascading into the fleet's communication system. The Zorvac's commands interface blinked out, and then nothing. Silence fell over the chamber, punctuated only by the distant hum of broken systems. The Zorvac soldiers froze, confusion rippling through their ranks. "What the hell?" one of them shouted, his voice distorted through his helmet's comms. Soren didn't hesitate. "It's our turn," he yelled, firing his rifle at the nearest Zorvac soldier. The shot found its mark, and the soldier collapsed in a heap. Anya turned to Ven. "Explosives, now." The sergeant wasted no time, triggering the detonators that had been planted in key parts of the flagship's infrastructure. The first explosion sent a shockwave through the room, shaking everything loose. Sparks flew, and the walls cracked, sending debris scattering across the floor. The Zorvac soldiers scrambled in the confusion, but Anya's team pressed forward, taking advantage of the chaos. Lyra was still working, but now she was moving with a sense of urgency that matched the fire in Anya's heart. "All systems are down," Lyra confirmed, her fingers hovering over the final console. But I can't shut off their self-destruct sequence. It's going to trigger in 2 minutes. That's enough time, Anya replied, scanning the room for threats. We need to get out. Now. But before they could make a move, the ground shook again, and the massive doors to the command core slammed open. Zalkar, the Zorvak's high commander, emerged from the smoke, his towering form cloaked in dark, jagged armor that gleamed like obsidian. He was an imposing figure, a monster of war, and as he strode into the room, a cruel smile played across his mandibles. So, the humans think they can escape. His voice was cold, dripping with contempt. You will not leave this place alive. Anya's breath caught in her throat. The war had always been about survival, but now it felt personal. This was the one who had been responsible for the death of billions, for the decimation of Earth and the colonies. She had thought she might never face him again, thought that once the war was over, his voice would be silenced. But here he was, in the heart of his ship, ready to finish what he had started. Soren stepped forward, weapon raised, but Anya stopped him with a quick shake of her head. No, this one's mine. Zalkar's eyes narrowed. So, you are the one who leads this pathetic rebellion, he sneered. You, who trusted the Elysian and betrayed them. Do you really think your people can win? You are nothing, just a fleeting spark in a universe that does not care. Anya's chest tightened. The weight of her actions, the burden of everything she had lost, all surged inside her. But beneath it all, something else burned. A fierce, unyielding fire. The fire of humanity's will to live. No, Zalkar, Anya said, her voice low but resolute. We're not nothing. We're the ones who will make sure you never get to finish what you started. She raised her weapon. The Zorvak's commander laughed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the command center. But before he could move, Anya charged. The ensuing battle was a blur of violence and desperation. Anya and Zalkar collided in a brutal clash of strength and fury. His claws slashed at her, but she ducked and dodged with a grace born of years of combat training. She fought like she had nothing left to lose, because, in a sense, she didn't. Zalkar roared, swinging his massive arm to crush her, but Anya ducked and rolled, using her momentum to leap onto his back. She jammed a pulse grenade into a vulnerable seam in his armor and triggered it. The explosion shook the entire flagship. Zalkar shrieked in pain as the blast ripped through his chest plate, but he managed to throw Anya off with a swipe of his hand. She hit the floor hard, pain searing through her body, but she didn't stop. She had to finish this. Soren and Ven, seeing the opening, took aim. Together, they fired. The combined shots pierced Zalkar's weakened armor, and he staggered backward, crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. For a moment, there was silence. Zalkar lay still, his life flickering away. And then, with his final breath, he hissed, "You may have won this battle, human. But the war is far from over." His body crumpled into nothing more than a heap of cold, lifeless metal. Anya's heart raced, the weight of the moment settling in. It was over. They had won. But as she looked around at her battered team, the flashing lights signaling the impending self-destruct of the Zorvak's flagship, Anya knew that their victory was only one piece of the puzzle. The Zorvaks were far from defeated, and the Elysian were still out there, watching, waiting, plotting their next move. But for now, they had one victory to hold on to, and it was enough. "Let's get out of here," Anya said, her voice hard, her resolve solidifying. "We have a future to fight for." The countdown was ticking down. They didn't have much time. The Zorvak's flagship was crumbling around them. The self-destruct countdown was in full swing, the emergency alarms blaring in every corner of the ship. The metallic groan of the dying vessel was punctuated by the staccato rhythm of heavy footsteps as Anya and her team scrambled toward the hangar bay. "We got 5 minutes until this whole ship goes up in flames," Ben said, his voice tinged with urgency as he fired his weapon at a retreating Zorvak soldier. "And with the amount of structural damage we've caused, this thing might blow faster than we thought." Anya didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted ahead, pushing herself harder, faster. The air was thick with the smell of burning electronics and ozone as the flagship systems failed one by one. As they neared the hangar, explosions echoed from deeper within the ship, both the Zorvak's retaliation and the final detonations of the charges they had planted earlier. The hangar doors loomed ahead, and Anya could see their escaped ship waiting, a patched-together salvage vessel with barely enough power to get them back to Mars. It was their only hope. The rest of the fleet, the resistance ships, were still locked in battle, and they needed to get out before the Zorvaks knew exactly what had happened. They had dealt a devastating blow, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. The team piled into the ship, and then slammed the hatch closed behind them. The ship's engines roared to life as they pushed through the hangar bay, narrowly avoiding the debris falling from the ceiling. For a moment, Anya felt like they might just make it. They had defeated Zalkar and crippled the Zorvak's flagship, perhaps buying humanity precious time. But as the ship broke through the hangar doors and into the vast emptiness of space, an alarm blared. "Shit. We've been targeted," Soren shouted, scanning the external sensors. Anya's gaze locked on the readings. A fresh Zorvak's battlecruiser had just entered the system, emerging from behind Mars. It was headed straight for them. "They've got us locked in," Soren muttered under his breath. "They won't let us go that easily." The countdown to the flagship's destruction ticked down relentlessly. They had barely escaped the death trap of the Zorvak's flagship, only to find themselves trapped by the Zorvak's fleet. Anya's hands gripped the console. The ship's systems were already weak, patched up from years of battle, and she knew they couldn't outrun the Zorvak's cruiser, not in their condition. "Then, can we get some more speed out of this ship?" Anya asked, eyes scanning the screens. Ven slapped a few controls, trying to reroute power to the engines. "I can give us a boost, but not for long. We'll be sitting ducks once the shields go down." "Do it anyway," Anya said, her voice sharp with command. "Hang on." Ven yelled as he pushed the engines to their limits. The ship lurched forward, shooting into the vacuum of space, but the Zorvak's cruiser was fast behind. Even with the boost, their engines were sputtering. Anya could feel the heat of the engines straining to maintain speed as they raced toward the asteroid belt that surrounded Mars, hoping the debris would give them a sliver of cover. But then a new signal came through. A communication from the heart of the resistance, General Markov. "Colonel, this is Markov. We've got backup coming from the outer colonies. It's a long shot, but we've activated the emergency defense fleet. They'll be with you in minutes. Hold on." "How many ships, General?" Anya demanded, glancing at the pursuing cruiser. The Zorvaks were closing in. They didn't have minutes. "A handful, but it's enough to give you a window to escape. Just stay alive long enough." Anya clenched her fists. It was their only shot, the only hope for the resistance. "We'll make it," she said, though her voice was tight. "Just make sure that fleet's on us before that cruiser closes in." The Zorvak's ship fired, a massive blast streaking toward them. The ship shuddered as the shields absorbed the impact, but Anya knew they couldn't take many more hits. The Zorvaks were relentless. This wasn't just about the battle anymore. It was about exterminating the last remnants of humanity. "Come on, come on," Ven shouted, working feverishly to keep the ship flying straight. The Zorvak's cruiser was almost on top of them when Anya finally saw it, light blooming in the distance. A dozen ships, coming out of the asteroid field, emerged like ghosts from the darkness. The emergency defense fleet. Their ragtag collection of ships wasn't much, but it was enough to force the Zorvaks to hesitate. The incoming fire from the Zorvak's cruiser was suddenly interrupted as the defense ships opened fire. The asteroid field erupted in flashes of light as laser fire and missiles collided with Zorvak shields. In that moment, the resistance fleet had a chance to push back. "Markov, get them out of here," Anya ordered, as the first salvo from the defense fleet disabled the Zorvak's cruiser's forward weapons. "We're covering your retreat, Colonel," Markov responded. "Now go." With the Zorvaks distracted, Anya's ship veered away, still rattling from the damage. The escape wasn't guaranteed, but they had bought themselves a fighting chance. The ship lurched again as they hit the edge of the asteroid field, the distant stars opening up before them. Anya watched the battle unfold in the rearview, the glow of the distant conflict painting her face. They were free, for now. We're alive, Soren said quietly, breaking the tense silence. But they won't stop coming. Anya leaned back in her seat, exhausted. She knew the truth of it. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. We'll be ready, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. This time we fight smarter. This time we make them pay for everything they've taken from us. Her eyes narrowed. There was no going back. The Zorvax had chosen the wrong enemy. Humanity would not bend, would not be crushed. The resistance would rise again, and this time they would not stop until the Zorvax were nothing but a shadow in the past. The escape was a brief respite, a flicker of hope in an otherwise grim reality. Anya stood on the bridge of the makeshift command center aboard the salvaged resistance vessel, staring out at the shattered remnants of the Zorvax flagship as it burned in the distance. The glow of the dying ship was a bitter reminder of the cost of their victory. But the brief celebration was over, and the war was far from won. The team had gathered around, their faces drawn and exhausted. The ship's interior was a far cry from the well-equipped Zorvax war machines they had infiltrated. But it was functional, just barely. Supplies were low, morale was fragile, but there was no turning back now. We've dealt them a blow they won't soon forget, General Markov's voice came through the comms. His face appeared on the holoscreen, lined with fatigue, but also a grim determination. But the Zorvax are regrouping. We know they've already sent word to their fleets. We have a small window to strike before they bring their full force against us. Anya nodded, her jaw tightening. The general was right. The fight was not over. Humanity had shown the Zorvax that they weren't simply going to fade into history, but the Zorvax weren't the kind of enemy that would retreat into the shadows. This was the final stage, the culmination of everything they had fought for. The Zorvax were angry, and when an empire as ruthless as theirs was angry, there was no telling what they might do. We need to hit them first, Anya said, turning to the team. We need to take out their war factories. If we can cripple their production, they'll be forced to slow down and regroup. That's when we can push them back. Soren, her ever-reliable sharpshooter, stepped forward. His eyes were cold, focused. We'll need a team to infiltrate one of their primary industrial hubs. We'll be fighting through Zorvax-controlled territory, but if we can disable their supply lines, their reinforcements will grind to a halt. Ven gave a sharp nod. I'll handle the explosives. You can count on me. Anya's thoughts turned inward for a moment. Memories of what the Zorvax had taken. Earth. The colonies. The people who had once trusted the promise of a peaceful alliance, only to be crushed by betrayal. Her people. Her people. Humanity had been on the brink of extinction, and it was time to show the Zorvax that humanity had no intention of fading into the night. I'll lead the strike team, Anya said, her voice unwavering. But I'll need Dr. Lyra. You're our only chance at cracking their security systems and getting us inside. Lyra, the quiet genius who had unlocked so much of the Elysian technology, didn't hesitate. She met Anya's gaze. I'm ready. If we take down their factories, we take down their war machine. It's the only way. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would infiltrate a key Zorvax war factory on one of the moons of Jupiter, an industrial hub capable of producing vast amounts of warships, drones, and weaponry. The Zorvax would be desperate to protect it, but they would be caught off guard. With a small, fast strike team, Anya's forces would plant explosive charges inside the facility's power core, crippling their production and causing a massive disruption in the Zorvax's war efforts. But the risks were immense. The factory was surrounded by an armada of Zorvax ships, their presence a looming shadow in the vastness of space. And the Zorvax had learned from their mistakes. This time, they wouldn't underestimate humanity's ability to strike back. We need to move fast, Anya said, and we'll need a diversion. The conversation shifted to tactics, how to disable their perimeter defenses, how to get in and out with minimal casualties. Time was not on their side. As the briefing ended, Anya found herself alone for a moment, standing by the viewport. The stars twinkled beyond, indifferent to the storm raging in the universe. For a fleeting moment, she closed her eyes, remembering the promise she had made to herself, to humanity. We will survive. We will fight. The days leading up to the mission passed in a blur of preparation, strategy, and sleepless nights. The Resistance fleet had grown, a motley collection of ships and survivors from every corner of the human territories. Together, they had one purpose: to ensure humanity's future. The strike force was assembled, and as they boarded the ships that would take them to the Zorvax factory, Anya couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Each member of her team knew what was at stake. For them, there was no turning back. The assault on the Zorvax industrial hub was brutal. The team fought their way through a gauntlet of Zorvax defenses, laser grids, automated turrets, and waves of heavily armored soldiers. Every step forward felt like an eternity. The air was thick with the sound of gunfire, explosions, and the scream of damaged machinery. Lyra worked tirelessly at the control systems, bypassing the Zorvax's sophisticated security measures with astonishing speed. The team cleared their path, fighting tooth and nail, pushing forward with one goal in mind: to plant the explosive charges at the facility's core and cripple the Zorvax war effort. But as they reached the core, an unexpected reality hit. The Zorvax had anticipated their move. The area was swarming with elite Zorvax troops, highly trained soldiers who moved with terrifying efficiency. A deadly firefight broke out, and for a moment, it seemed like they might be overwhelmed. Anya ducked behind a column as plasma fire ripped through the air, feeling the heat of near misses. She was aware of the sacrifices being made by her team, the desperate struggle to hold the line. "Lyra," she shouted over the comms, "you've got to get that core activated now." "I'm almost there," Lyra replied, voice strained but determined. With one final push, Soren cleared the path, his sniper rifle taking down the last of the Zorvax elite soldiers. The core was secure. The explosive charges were set. "Everyone out now," Anya shouted. The team made their way to the extraction point, just as the first blast of energy from the core's reactor began to surge through the facility. The explosion rippled outward, a pulse of light that obliterated everything in its path. They were out of the blast radius, but barely. As they boarded the extraction ship and flew into the darkness of space, Anya watched the Zorvax factory erupt behind them. The shockwave rocked their ship, but they held steady, barely escaping with their lives. "Is it over?" Soren asked, his voice low and tired. Anya glanced back at the wreckage, the remnants of a Zorvax stronghold reduced to nothing. The answer was unclear. "It's only just begun," she replied, staring ahead into the endless expanse of space. "But today, humanity made its stand, and we'll keep making it until the Zorvax know that we will never give up." With the factory gone, the Zorvax's grip had loosened, but the war was far from over. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. But the final victory would only come when every last Zorvax was driven from the stars.